Welcome to Opposition Territory here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world, over 12 and a half years strong. We got a great discussion coming your way as we preview the Philadelphia Eagles and Las Vegas Raiders upcoming matchup here in Week 15. It's going to be a barn burner, folks, with these teams. Eagles offense that is floundering, a Raiders team that is basically out of contention here at this point, but we're still going to dive into this matchup. We have from silverandblackpride.com. You know, we love our SB Nation sites out there. We've got our good friend, Matt Holder. Buddy, man, thanks so much for joining us for our preview show this week.
Appreciate you having me on. Always a pleasure.
Always great to have you on, man, to talk about this Raiders team and just the NFL in general. So I guess to start off the conversation and discussion here on this preview show, honestly, a lot of us Eagles fans, we're kind of down in the dumps right now, even though the record...
Welcome to the party.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, the record is what it is. This team is 8-5. They're still atop of the NFC East, but based on what the defending Super Bowl champs are looking like from an offensive perspective, I mean, things are just down in the dumps here. So everything's a mess. Poor offensive coaching, poor execution from offensive players. So I'm wondering, Matt, how is Raiders Nation really looking at this game as their season is essentially over? Are they looking to play some type of spoiler role here for the Philadelphia Eagles, or perhaps maybe figure out what they have for the future on offense and defense? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so I think this is normally a time of year where a lot of like Raider Nation is kind of split between some people wanting to go out and see them win a few games and play spoiler,
Yeah.
which I understand as a fan never want to root against your team, and then the team people who are on Team Tank. But this year it's been a little bit different. I think part of the problem is if you go back and look at the last 3 seasons since they've moved on for Derek Carr, they've had a new starting quarterback every single year.
Yeah.
And Geno Smith very clearly isn't not the long-term answer. So I think this year there's a lot more people who are just hoping they kind of mail it in and start losing these games down the stretch so that they can secure this number one overall pick, because if they lose out, they will have number one overall based on the strength of schedule and whatnot. So I think there's definitely the majority of the fan base wants to see them lose and get a shot at taking a Fernando Mendoza or a Dante Moore and get some sort of answer there. So I think that does provide some silver linings for the Eagles. I think this is a team that definitely obviously they want to evaluate some of these young guys, but a lot of those guys haven't been hitting the field until recently anyway. So I think this is a point in the year where the majority of the fan base seems to be on Team Tank and wanting to see them lose out for the rest of the year.
I hadn't planned on asking you this, and I send our guests, the topics we're going to dive into, but I just wonder what your thoughts are with regard to the coaching, especially, when you have, a guy like Chip Kelly as well, who the Philadelphia Eagles know all too well. What are your thoughts on the offensive coaching specifically and how that has worked out for Raiders Nation this year?
Well, I think part of the problem is when you bring up the coaching, I think you have to start with Pete Carroll being 74 years old, and this organization look like it's treading towards a rebuild, and Pete Carroll will be 75 in middle of September next year. So I think that's kind of the one thing that's looming over the Raiders is, yes, Pete Carroll has a great resume and it's only year one, but to how much sense does it make sense with the coach that's going to be halfway to 80 at the beginning of next year?
Yeah.
And part of it too is part of the offensive struggles. Brendan Carroll is the offensive line coach, and that group as a whole has regressed. You'll look at a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson, who they were moving around, who was really good center last year. They tried playing him at guard. At one point, he got injured. Then they made him earn his spot back, and it's just kind of been a big mess. And at right tackle, DJ Glaze had a promising rookie season. He's regressed this year too. So I think that's one of the big things that I think a lot of people are looking at is, one, Pete Carroll's job security, and two, is he willing to move on from his son, which as I can imagine being a parent myself, like that's not exactly something I'd ever want to put position I'd ever want to be in.
Right.
And one I don't think I'd ever put myself in. So it's an interesting dilemma. You brought up Chip Kelly. I'll say that Chip Kelly was part of the problem. He's running a college style offense, and a lot of things that were going on were on his fault or on his plate. But these last, what's it been? 3 weeks since he got fired, 2-3 weeks since he got fired. It's not like the Raiders offense is out there scoring 20, 30, or even 20 points a game. I think they've been held under 20 for the last, since Greg Olson took over. So There's a lot of things going on, coaching staff being one of them, and I think that'll be the first order of business once this regular season ends. That I
Yeah.
think a lot of people will be looking forward towards.
Yeah, I just wonder at this point if Chip Kelly is basically a cautionary tale at this point from an NFL perspective. Like you said, he was running a college style offense, and it just doesn't translate over to the NFL. So anyway, that being said, we always love on our opposition territory podcast to get into the weaknesses and strength of the team that the Eagles are playing that week. So let's dive into it here, Matt. I mean, what is the biggest strength of this Raiders team as we're heading into Week 15 here? If there is,
Yeah,
my friend.
yeah. I was gonna say when you sent that to me, my first reaction was that's a tough question because they don't have a lot of strengths, but and they don't have and they have plenty of weaknesses. So
Right, right.
I think the one thing that you can point to as far as like a strength is Max Crosby is still playing at an elite level.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's gone into the top tier, I'd say, of run defenders at the edge position. I think he's at about 25, 26 tackles for loss this year. He's already set a career high in that mark. I believe he leads the league. I'm not sure where Miles Garrett's at, but he's been wreaking havoc. He also has 9 sacks. He's not getting as much pressure and winning quite as much as we've grown accustomed to.
Yeah.
But that's a big reason for that is getting into the weaknesses. They don't have another pass rusher that opposing offensive lines really have to account for and to take the
Yeah.
pressure off. So it's pretty much every game plan for offenses is we're going to make someone else beat us on the defensive line, and no one else really does.
Yeah.
And then
Weakness.
offensively,
Yeah. What do you think in terms of the weakness? I was going to say the biggest weakness of this team. You said there's so many.
yeah, I think the biggest one's got to be the offensive line, and I think
Yeah.
that's holding back the offense and the team in general more than anything. I mentioned the issues with the coaching and switching up the lineup. On top of it, Colton Miller's been out since week 4, which I think is they're really feeling the loss of. Stone Forsythe is taking over, and he's in the past been literally the worst offensive tackle in the NFL, and
Yeah.
this season's been a little bit better, but again, the bar is pretty low. They're also dealing with the injury of Jackson Powers Johnson. Jordan Meredith, who was their starting center for the majority of the season, he's been out the last 2 weeks, and then they just don't have a ton of talent behind him. They got better performances in the last few weeks, in the last couple of weeks from Dylan Parham, who's their left guard, and then they've gotten some encouraging signs from Caleb Rogers, who made his NFL debut 2 weeks ago. He was a rookie, and he's the rookie third-round pick, and it looked good. So there's trending in the right direction, but that to me is like the biggest weakness, and especially going up against this Eagle team that even without Jalen Carter has a pretty strong defensive line, especially with the addition of Jalen Phillips. That's
Yeah.
something I think that Philadelphia can really take advantage of. Is they're going up against probably the worst offensive line in the NFL this year.
Yeah. And we're gonna get to the Eagles defense and how they're gonna be matching up against the offense in just a little bit more in some
Yeah.
detail. But I do wonder. As I mentioned earlier, the offense is bad. We all know this. It's an ongoing storyline in the NFL. The Eagles, defending Super Bowl champs, they basically bring back the entire offense from last year, aside from their right guard in Tyler Steen. And this Eagles offense is just bad. It's poorly coached. They're not executing at all. I think everybody that follows the NFL knows this here. I mean, Jalen Hurts is struggling, and we saw it this past week. Four interceptions, 5 total turnovers. I mean, the play design is absolutely horrible. I could continue to go on, and there could be an opportunity, I think, for the Raiders defense to actually show NFL football fans something this week, and maybe that's just me being a downtrodden Eagles fan in terms of the offense. How can the Raiders defense really keep the Eagles offense on their toes this week, Matt?
Well, I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for the Raiders. Like I said, their defensive line, especially at like the defensive tackle spot, is pretty weak, and that's in both phases of the game. I mean, you go back and watch the Broncos last week. Broncos came into that game struggling to run the football ever since J.K. Dobbins was injured, and then
Yeah.
R.J. Harvey, their rookie second-round pick, ended up having a career day because they just have no presence in the middle. Devin White, another former Eagle. If you look at his box score, you think Devin White's having an All-Pro type of year. But then you turn on the film when you look up the advanced numbers, and it's a completely different story. And I'll tell you, I'll lean towards the latter. They have two. Their two linebackers, White and Landon Roberts, are second and third missed tackles this season. Just to paint the picture for you.
Yeah.
So I think the good news for the Raiders that as far as getting right is they are getting better cornerback play. Eric Stokes has been one of the pleasant free agent signings. Who's done a really good job this year of shutting guys down. I do think he benefits a little bit from playing on a weak unit where teams just aren't targeting him as much. But on the other side, Darian Porter is their third-round pick, who's been getting a lot more playing time last week, and he held his own last week against Cortland Sutton, who I think is one of the um, better X receivers and better more physical wideouts in the game. So I think that's kind of the saving grace for if you are looking at the Raiders, where they have a chance to face a passing offense that's struggling, and they have a couple of corners that have shown some promise. So I'll be interested to see how that unfolds and
Yeah.
view a little bit of what gives in, because again, the Raiders defense has not been very good last year. To paint the picture for you, the Broncos had the ball for time of possession wise for nearly 40 minutes last game, so 2/3 of the game, and they
Wow.
lost the possession because they returned a punt back for a touchdown. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the state of what the defense is like in Las Vegas.
All right. Well, folks, we are going to take a break here, but before we do, make sure you're following Matt on the Twitter/X out there at mholder95. Great follow. And again, silverandblackpride.com. He's one of their contributors over there. Is there any other place where folks should follow you at if they want to connect with you, Matt?
Yeah, Twitter will do it. I also do some draft stuff from Bleacher Report. So if you
That's
guys
right.
want to check us out
Yep.
there too, I got some I'm in charge of linebackers and defensive linemen. So if you guys want to take a peek over there and see what we got in store.
God, I should have you on to talk about the Penn State linebacker situation, which is holy
Yeah.
cow, unbelievable what's happening with that college football program. But as we're moving forward here, folks, like and subscribe if you are watching us on YouTube. We'd appreciate that. Hit that bell to be notified when we post new videos. And we are also on various social media sites as well. Search out the Philadelphia Sports Table. You can search out me as well. You can give us a follow. Just, again, search out the Philadelphia Sports Table podcast show and give us a follow on some social sites. So with that being said, we're going to take a quick break to pay some bills. We will be back in just a bit. All right, we are back with our good buddy Matt Holder from silverandblackpride.com over at SB Nation. And as we continue to look at this upcoming matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Las Vegas Raiders, I really wanted to dive into how the Raiders offense may be able to penetrate the Eagles defense. This Eagles defense, Matt, is the bright spot on this team, for God's sake. Vic Fangio has them running on all cylinders. And I'm wondering, is there a way that you actually can see the Raiders offense really being able to dissect the Eagles defense in any way, shape, or form? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, not really, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I have a lot of respect for that Eagles defense.
Yeah.
And again, what we've seen from the Raiders offense is literally like the worst offense in the league. The one thing that I am kind of interested in, this broke before we start, or just before we started recording here.
Ooh.
Kenny Pickett's looking like he's going to be starting this week. So another former
Ooh.
Eagle, because Geno Smith got injured in last
Yeah.
week's game.
Yep.
And Pickett came in towards the end of the game last week, and again, it was garbage time. So take it with a grain of salt. But he looked a lot better and a lot more functional. I think he led 2 scoring drives, including that field goal that made its rounds on gambling social media last week. That
Yeah.
had Pete Carroll had a lot of people angry at him for. But he looked a lot better than I think Geno has all season, where Pickett was stepping up in the pocket, using his legs to help overcome some of the offensive line deficiencies, and just being more decisive with the football. So I think that's the one kind of silver lining. I think if you're the Raiders, where you have a new quarterback that the Eagles, well, I mean, I guess they know him well because they played with him last year, but they haven't seen him in this offense. Where maybe he can give them a little bit of a spark, because he certainly provided it last week when Geno was down, and I thought looked decent, especially for coming off the bench and cold in that situation.
Yeah.
And threw a nice pass to Cedric Jackson, who was a guy that was just called up from the practice squad and scored his first NFL touchdown. So I'll be interested to see how Kenny Pickett can do. I think that's the one kind of saving grace for this offense going into this game, is there's a little bit of the unknown, I'll say, with Pickett, whereas we know what we were going to get with Geno at this point.
Yeah. I wonder, the next topic I wanted to dive into was, what sneaky player might we need to keep our eyes on this Raiders team in general. Maybe it is Kenny Pickett. I don't know. Maybe you have somebody else in mind, because every week as we're watching these NFL games, as you're watching the Raiders, I'm watching the Eagles, there's always that sneaky player that carves themselves some sort of pivotal role within the game. So we don't have a crystal ball, but I'm wondering, is there a sneaky Raiders player or two that we may need to keep our eyes on here?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple. Both of them are rookies. One I've talked about before, Darian Porter. Again, I think he's coming off a pretty good performance last week against Cortland Sutton. Gave up, I think, in the game total, was targeted 6 times, gave up 3 catches for 34 yards, and had a couple PBUs along the way.
Yeah,
and he's kind of come along. He's caught my eye even when before he was getting a ton of playing time. So he's a guy that I'm really excited to see what he can do up against receivers like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. And then on the other side of the ball, Jack Betch is coming off the best game of his career. He had 6 targets and caught all 6 of them for 50 yards,
Yeah.
which I know is pretty underwhelming, but the guy hasn't really gotten much playing time this season. And he's an interesting guy because he's been very efficient. I think he has 16 catches on the year, and I want to say 10 have gone for first downs.
Okay.
So he's another guy that I'm kind of curious to see what he does in this final stretch of the season, including going up against the Eagles, who have a couple good guys in the secondary, and Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. So those are the 2 guys that I'd be keeping some tabs on that might be able to sneak up on people or sneak up on the Eagles. Jack Betch and Darian Porter. And part of it is they haven't played that much this season, so it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how they do and if they can beat a couple of quality opponents.
And I will say for the Eagles fans who are watching this or listening to us on whatever podcast platform you're on, we're going to see Raiders players who are trying to make some sort of mark potentially for next year from a developmental standpoint. There are going to be guys on this Raiders team that want to make their mark. So these sneaky players that Matt's talking about, we're going to need to keep our eyes on them for sure, because
sure.
even they may not be, putting up, 150 yards in terms of receptions, they're going to want to make their mark in some way, shape, or form. So, Matt, we always ask our opposition territory guests every week these final 2 questions here about one thing each team is going to need to hit on for a win this week. So let's start with the Raiders. What's the one thing that the Raiders are going to need to hit on for a win this week against the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, I think it starts with the passing game. I think one of the biggest things, like we were just talking about, if Kenny Pickett can provide some sort of spark, and if he can get a good connection going with a guy like Jack Betch. We haven't even mentioned Brock Bowers, who's one of the best tight ends in the league after even after just 2 years. And if he can get the ball to those guys and feed them and have a good performance, I think that's going to be the key to the Raiders winning. And then for the Eagles, I think it's gonna have to start with running the ball. I know they've had their struggles in that department too, and with the offensive line. And I know I'm probably not breaking anybody any news, but again, going back to what I was talking about last week against the Broncos were struggling around the ball until they came into Las Vegas and ran it right down the Raiders' throats. So I think that's the saving grace if you're a Philadelphia fan, where this could be a good opportunity for Saquon Barkley and the Eagles' offensive line to have their get right moment heading into the playoffs or this last little run.
I'll tell you right now, if there is any way that this Eagles offense and Saquon Barkley can get any rushing going in the A gap, I will be absolutely astonished. It just doesn't work this year for some reason.
This is the week to do it, though.
This might be the week. Yes, absolutely. Again, folks, Matt Holder from Silver and blackpride.com over at SB Nation. Great contributor over there. At mholder95 over on the Twitter/X, and check out what he's doing over at Bleacher Report as well in terms of the NFL draft. My friend, it was great talking to you. Thanks so much for taking the time here, and always love talking to you. Come back. I'd love to have you on the show again, my friend.
Absolutely, Jeff. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you for having me on again.